You are not watching this story. You are in it. At the end of each video, two choices will appear. Your decision determines what happens next. There is no going back. There are places where the soil remembers. Not history, something older. The kind of memory that lives in roots and rainwater. In the spaces between heartbeats when you wake at 3 in the morning and cannot remember why you are afraid. Elena Vukova received a letter on the last Tuesday of October. The envelope was yellowed, the stamp foreign and 20 years out of date. Inside, a single photograph of a house she did not recognize, and a key, heavy, iron, cold even through the paper. The lawyer who handed it to her had dust under his fingernails. He did not meet her eyes. He spoke of a great-aunt, a woman named Vera, who had lived and died in a village that appeared on no map Elena could find. The house was hers now. The land. The silence that came with it. She drove for 9 hours, leaving the highway for roads that narrowed, then cracked, then turned to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that was merely the absence of forest. The pines grew thicker as the elevation increased, until they were not trees anymore, but columns. A cathedral of black needles where light went to die. The house waited at the end of a path no vehicle could traverse. She walked the final kilometer with her suitcase catching on roots that seemed to reach for her, that seemed to know the weight of what she carried. The key fit a lock that had not been opened, the lawyer said, in 17 years. The door swung inward without sound, without resistance, as if the house had been holding its breath. Inside, the air was wrong. Not stale, preserved. Like fruit in vinegar. Like meat in salt. The furniture stood in perfect arrangement, draped in white sheets that had yellowed to the color of old teeth. A kettle sat on a cold stove. A half-finished sweater draped over a rocking chair. The needles still embedded in the wool, as if the hands working it had simply dissolved. Elena moved through the rooms without purpose, touching surfaces that left residue on her fingertips. Grease, wax, something organic she did not name. The walls were lined with photographs in frames of dark wood, and in every photograph, the same woman, Vera, young in the early frames, standing in this same doorway, this same kitchen, this same bedroom. Then older, then old, then and here, Elena felt the first true cold, then young again. The same face, the same dress, the same posture. The photographs continued for 60 years without variation, without aging, without explanation. She found the journal on the third day. It was not hidden. It sat in a drawer beneath spare candles and matches, bound in leather that had gone soft as skin. The handwriting matched the letter that had summoned her, precise, slanted, written with a pen that had needed more ink than the words suggested. Elena read by candlelight because the house had electricity that flickered, that hummed at frequencies she felt in her teeth, that cast shadows which did not align with any source she could locate. The entries began with weather, crops, the price of wool. Then, gradually, other observations. The shape of darkness in the root cellar after midnight. The sound of footsteps on the roof when no snow fell. The way the well water tasted of copper on certain mornings and of nothing at all on others. On the 14th page, Vera had written of the hollow ones. They were not demons, not ghosts, not anything that had names in the books Elena had read, the films she had seen, the stories told at sleepovers to make children afraid of the dark. The hollow ones were older than fear. They were the reason fear existed, the first recognition that the world had depths, and that some depths had intentions. Vera described a ritual, not a summoning, a maintenance, a keeping of boundaries. The house stood on a place where the membrane between what is and what waits grew thin. Every generation, a woman of the bloodline had to take residence. had to perform the small duties that kept the membrane intact, had to become, in Vera's words, the membrane herself. The duties were simple. Feed the fire in the East Room, though no chimney served it. Leave milk at the threshold on nights when the moon showed only its dark face. And never, under any circumstance, descend to the cellar after the clock struck 12. Elena read this entry 3 times. The clock in the hallway, pendulum, brass-faced, older than the house itself, showed 11:43. She had not seen a cellar door. She found it on her 4th search of the ground floor, concealed behind a cabinet that moved only when she stopped trying to move it, when she stood with her hand on the wood and felt the vibration that was not vibration, the frequency that was not sound. The door was stone, not wood over stone. Solid granite, fitted so precisely into the wall that no seam showed except the fingers that knew where. To press out the key from the envelope did not fit. Nothing fit. The door had no lock, no handle, no mechanism of any kind. Only a depression in the center, shaped like a handprint. Like a handprint pressed into wet clay and allowed to dry for centuries. The clock chimed the quarter hour. 11:45, Elena returned to the journal. The later entries grew shorter, more urgent. Vera described dreams of descending endless staircases, of chambers that opened into other chambers, of a voice that spoke without language, but with perfect meaning. The voice offered things: restoration of youth, return of the dead, knowledge of where the lost things went, the keys, the letters, the hours that seemed to vanish between one moment and the next. All it required was an opening, a moment of invitation, a choice made in the dark when the mind was not fully awake, when the boundaries between decision and compulsion grew as thin as the membrane. The bloodline was sworn to maintain. The final entry was not in Vera's hand. The letters were formed carefully, almost childishly, as if written by someone unaccustomed to physical movement. The ink was different, darker, with a viscosity that made the words stand slightly above the page. Elena touched them without thinking, and her fingertip came away stained, and the stain smelled of the well water, of copper and absence. The entry read, "She opened the door. She opened the door. She opened the door." The same phrase, repeated 247 times, filling every page from that point forward, the handwriting growing more confident, more fluid, more like Vera's own with each repetition, until the final page where the hand had grown tired and simply pressed the pen into the paper hard enough to tear through, leaving a hole shaped exactly like the depression in the stone door. Elena looked up. The clock showed 11:58. The stone door was open, not wide, a finger's width. Enough to show darkness that was not the absence of light, but something with texture, with weight, with temperature that registered as neither warm nor cold, but as the memory of both. The concept of thermal sensation without the physical reality. From that gap came sound. Not breathing, not wind. The space between breaths, extended, stretched, made audible. The expectation of respiration without its fulfillment. The acoustic shadow of something that had learned to imitate life by studying its intervals. Elena stepped closer. The gap in the door seemed to pulse, not with movement, but with possibility, with the potential for motion that had not yet been realized. She could see stairs descending, not wooden, not stone, something that reflected no light from her candle. That seemed to absorb the very idea of illumination. The clock began to strike. Midnight. The first chime reverberated through the floorboards, through her chest cavity, through the hollow spaces in her bones. With each subsequent strike, the gap in the door widened. Not because anything pushed it, because the concept of closure was being eroded. The way a photograph fades when left in sun, not through force, but through the simple persistence of time and exposure. By the 12th chime, the door stood fully open. The stairs descended into a darkness that had depth, that had topology, that had features Elena could not see, but could feel pressing against her optic nerves, like a shape pressed against a sheet. The air that rose from below carried minerals and moisture and something else. Something that smelled of the photographs on the walls, of the skin-like leather of the journal, of the residue on her fingertips. She understood then what the membrane was. Not a barrier, a negotiation, a place where two forms of existence acknowledged each other without contact, without merging, without the contamination that would occur if the boundary failed. Vera had maintained it. Vera had become it. And now Vera was gone, and the membrane was thinning, and something was pressing through from the side, where geometry and duration and identity were not fixed qualities, but raw materials. Elena stood at the threshold. Behind her, the house breathed. She felt it now. The expansion and contraction of spaces that had seemed static. The peristalsis of corridors and chambers that were digesting her presence, transforming her from visitor to component. Ahead, the stairs offered descent. Not escape, not answers. Something else. Something that had no name in any language, because the need for that name had not yet arisen. The candle flame bent toward the opening. Not away, as it should if air rose from below. Toward, as if the darkness below had pressure, had gravity, had appetite. Elena felt the handprint depression in the stone. It was warm now. Warm and slightly moist, as if something had pressed against it from the other side. Something that had studied her hand through the stone and learned its shape, its temperature, its capacity for action. The choice was not between safety and danger. Both paths led through danger. The choice was between forms of transformation. Between becoming the membrane, as Vera had, or becoming something that passed through it. The candle guttered. The darkness below shifted, not with movement, but with attention, with the focusing of something that had been diffuse and was now specific, now directed, now aware of her in the way a predator becomes aware of prey, not through sight, but through the disturbance of air, the displacement of possibility. Elena looked back at the house she had inherited. The photographs watched from their frames. The sweater waited on its chair. The kettle sat on its cold stove. All of it was offered. All of it was conditional. All of it was part of a pattern that extended backward through Vera and forward through her, through the daughters she did not have, through the daughters they would not have. A chain of maintenance and erosion that would continue until the membrane failed entirely, or until someone found a way to thicken it, to make it permanent, to end the need for blood and vigilance, and the slow erosion of self that came from standing at the edge of the dark and refusing to step in. The clock showed 12:03. The witching hour, the lawyers had called it when she asked about local custom. The hollow hour. The time when the membrane grew thin enough to see through, if one had the courage to look, and the wisdom to understand that seeing was itself a form of opening. Your decision determines what happens next. Descend the stairs or search the house for Vera's ritual tools. There is no correct path, only the one you choose. The house remembers, the hollow ones wait.